She has no felony convictions. She has suffered from mental illness since the age of 22, diagnosed with schizophrenia. And Bionca has been treated on an outpatient basis at a place called Murders Taylor for almost 10 years. There's been a lot of ups and downs as it relates to her treatment. You'll hear from her mother, Yolanda Eggleton, and she'll come in and she'll testify the struggles of trying to get Murders Taylor to medicate Bionca. Because Bionca, when she's on her medication versus when she's off her medication, she's two different people. And she pushed hard for Murders Taylor to try to do something about Bionca being on medication. And Murders Taylor's response was, she doesn't represent a danger to herself or others, so there's nothing that we could do. She'll tell you how she lost contact with Bionca over the course of 6 to 8 months prior to this incident. And I'll tell you that no one's going to dispute, the evidence will show that she's a mentally ill person. Between January of 2024 up until the date of this incident, June 3rd, 2024, Bionca was off of her medication. The medication, the evidence will show, stabilizes her. Bionca received a Social Security check. And what she did with that check was she traveled from the state of Ohio to the state of California. She traveled from the state of California back to Ohio, and then down to Florida, and eventually back to Ohio. During that time frame, there were many occasions where Bionca exhibited mental illness. There were occasions where she would go to a particular location and try to get herself arrested because she's living in a homeless shelter, because she's living on the streets. She's trying to find structure. I think the evidence will show that during her mental illness, she tried to find places of refuge, unsuccessfully. On June 3rd of 2024, this unfortunate tragedy occurs. Just a few days before, Bionca was in the North Homestead jail.
All right, well,
in broad daylight, never trying to conceal the knife. And she doesn't run away. She walks away. The knife in hand. Still carrying the knife after the sack is filled. The evidence will show that there was no rational motive for her to have committed this offense. There's evidence will show that there's no relationship between she and the victims in this case. She still has a knife in hand at the time that the police confronts her. And she does drop it. Bionca's brought back to the police station. And eventually, she's interviewed. There's evidence of mental illness that occurred as a result of her responses in that interview. There's evidence that would show that she was irrational at all points of time. During that interview, while in the jail, even when she arrived in the county jail, sitting naked on the floor. Bionca displayed mental illness from the beginning of this incident, for the months prior to this incident, while in the jail. And if by chance You saw her at her arraignment. The evidence will show that even during her arraignment, she was still mentally ill because she was smiling at the arraignment. The evidence will show that she answered the judge in Spanish when being asked questions. The evidence will also show that we had a difficult time communicating with Bionca. So much so that Dr. Sarah West became involved in the case. And she had to make an evaluation of whether or not she was competent to aid in her defense. And because her mental illness was still going on, Dr. West referred her to North Coast Behavioral. North Coast is a place where mentally ill people, they're there to get restored and for other reasons, but for Bionca's purposes, it's for restoration, to get her competent so she can understand this process. So after the competency evaluation, Dr. West was requested to evaluate her for sanity. And the evidence will show that Dr. West did evaluate her for sanity. She looked at all of her prior psychiatric treatment over the many years since she was age 22, her behavior on the day of the incident, and all the other information that she took into consideration after. And Dr. West made a determination that she was insane at the time of the offense. You'll hear that evidence. But the state has a right to have their own doctor become involved. And Dr. Knopfsinger also made his evaluation, and he made the opposite determination. You'll have to make that determination based on the evidence that's presented in this case. You'll hear from some other doctors that dealt with her while she was at North Coast. And at the end of the day, you will have to make the determination. And I told you in the beginning during jury selection that she acknowledges through her lawyers, whether she testifies or not, that she's responsible for the murder of Julian. She acknowledges through her lawyers that she's responsible for the attempted murder of Margot. There's no running away from that. That's not what this trial is about. The evidence will show, though, that it is obvious that she was insane at the time of the offense. And no matter what your experiences have been, you have to evaluate that information. That's all we're asking you to do. Lastly, I believe that at the conclusion of this case, you will find that Mr. Johnson and I have met our burden of a preponderance by the evidence, okay? A preponderance of the evidence, and that burden is far less than what the state has to prove. Thank you.
Thank you.